Claire Bennett held the wedding invitation in her hands, the delicate cream-colored paper trembling slightly between her fingers as the morning light from her Seattle apartment streamed through the half-open blinds, casting thin stripes across the hardwood floor. "I could not believe the invitation I just received," she whispered under her breath, the words hanging in the air like a fragile secret she was not ready to share. Her gaze lingered on the elegant script, the careful detailing of every name and date, and a cold mixture of disbelief and confusion curled in her stomach. She set the envelope gently on the kitchen counter, as if placing it there could somehow contain the weight of its message, and walked to the living room, feeling the soft hum of the city outside her window, the distant sound of streetcars clanging against the rails and the faint chatter of neighbors beginning their day. Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts, the soft scent of brewed coffee mingling with the crisp morning air filtering in from the window. She approached the small writing desk near the window, her hand brushing against the smooth oak surface as she sat down, staring at the invitation as her mind wrestled with a cascade of emotions, shock, curiosity, and the unspoken question of what it meant for her life from this point forward. Carefully, she picked up the envelope again, unfolding the invitation with deliberate slowness, feeling the texture of the fine paper under her fingertips, each word engraved like a marker of a past she had tried to leave behind. Her heart thumped unevenly as she read the names, the dates, the location, each detail pulling her deeper into a whirlpool of memories and uncertainties. Claire placed the invitation down on the desk, her fingers lingering on the edge, and closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, letting the cool air fill her lungs, grounding herself amidst the storm of internal tension. She rose from her chair and moved toward the window, resting her hands lightly on the sill, eyes fixed on the soft morning haze that wrapped the city in muted gold. The sounds of Seattle waking up, the distant call of seagulls. Over the sound, the rumble of a bus, the faint murmur of early joggers, created a quiet rhythm that contrasted sharply with the cacophony of thoughts inside her mind. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as she whispered again to herself, "I could not believe the invitation I just received," this time with a note of determination threading through her disbelief. She adjusted the envelope on the desk one more time, her fingers lingering on it before stepping back, taking one last look at it as if daring herself to confront the reality it represented. The soft light of the morning played across her face, highlighting a quiet resolve settling into her features, the start of a journey she knew would challenge her, provoke her emotions, and ultimately define a new chapter of her life. "It has been months. I need to stay calm," Claire Bennett murmured to herself, the words barely audible over the soft rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze swept through the small park near her Seattle apartment. The morning sun shone weakly through patches of cloud, casting a soft, diffused light on the damp sidewalks from last night's drizzle, the smell of wet earth and pine lingering in the air. Claire's steps were measured as she walked past joggers and dog walkers, her eyes flicking occasionally to a nearby cafe where a barista arranged fresh pastries behind the counter, the warm scent of coffee drifting toward the park benches. Her mind raced, memories of the wedding invitation still pressing heavily against her chest, and the words she had just whispered seemed both a warning and a promise to herself. She passed a group of early risers laughing quietly, their carefree chatter a subtle reminder of normalcy she had not yet felt in weeks. Claire paused at a wrought iron fence, resting her hands lightly on the top rail, inhaling deeply the crisp morning air, letting it fill her lungs and steady her pulse. The distant hum of traffic mingled with the faint cries of seagulls from the waterfront, and she closed her eyes for a moment, imagining herself moving through the day with calm resolve rather than the storm of emotions bubbling beneath her surface. A young man jogged past, nodding politely, and Claire offered a small smile, realizing that even small gestures of connection could provide grounding. She opened her eyes, letting them drift over the city skyline emerging through the mist, the shapes of the buildings softened by the fog, the quiet tension in her chest slowly beginning to ease. Pulling her coat tighter against the lingering chill, she shifted her weight and continued her walk, her thoughts circling the wedding, the past, and what the future might demand from her. Each step seemed to echo a silent mantra. She could face this, she could rise above it, she could maintain her dignity. The sound of a bus rolling along the street reminded her that life went on, indifferent to her personal upheaval, and she felt a strange mixture of relief and urgency, a need to act decisively yet to preserve the quiet strength she had cultivated over months of reflection. As she rounded the corner toward her favorite bench overlooking a small fountain, a passerby's laugh made her glance up, catching the fleeting expressions of people around her, their normalcy accentuating her own inner tension. She took one final deep breath, allowing herself a moment to feel the weight of anticipation and the clarity of purpose settling in her mind, a delicate balance of vulnerability and determination. Claire adjusted her scarf, her gaze returning to the invitation tucked carefully in her coat pocket, the paper a tangible reminder of the challenge ahead, and she continued walking, each step carrying her closer to the unknown, aware that the resolution she sought had yet to appear, and that every choice in the coming hours could shift the balance of her inner calm, and the stirring curiosity about what lay at the wedding she could not yet foresee. "I will show them who I have become," Claire Bennett whispered under her breath, the words carrying a quiet determination that made the soft afternoon sunlight in her Seattle apartment feel warmer, more purposeful. She sat at her small, tidy writing desk by the window, where the light spilled over the scattered pages of her journal and a half-filled cup of chamomile tea, the faint aroma mingling with the crisp air drifting through the open sash. Outside, the city hummed gently, the distant sound of ferry horns echoing from the waterfront and the soft rustle of leaves in the mild breeze setting a rhythm that mirrored the pulse of her thoughts. Claire's fingers hovered over the pen for a moment, then she began to write, letting the ink flow freely, capturing her vision for the new empowerment book she had been crafting for months, each word a testament to her resilience and creativity. She paused occasionally, glancing at the invitation to the wedding tucked beside her notebook, a tangible reminder of the challenge that awaited, and a subtle smile crossed her lips as she realized that her own journey and growth were beginning to shine through, independent of the past. The faint knock on her apartment door drew her attention, and she rose gracefully to open it, revealing her friend and neighbor Emily, carrying a small box of fresh pastries and a bright thermos of coffee. "I thought you could use a little pick-me-up," Emily said warmly, her presence a comforting counterbalance to the tension lingering in Claire's chest. Claire thanked her, gesturing for her to come in, and they settled by the window, sipping the warm coffee and sharing quiet laughter, the ordinary domesticity grounding Claire in the moment and reminding her of the small joys that had persisted even through upheaval. As the light shifted toward late afternoon, casting long golden beams across the hardwood floor, Claire returned to her desk, flipping through her journal to a clean page, and began sketching out ideas for chapters, themes, and exercises that would empower her readers. The sense of purpose enveloped her, a quiet fire growing stronger with each passing minute, yet the shadow of the impending wedding invitation never fully lifted, a knot of anticipation and nervous curiosity threading through her concentration. She stepped to the window again, looking out over the city streets below, watching pedestrians navigate their routines, and felt a strange mix of serenity and readiness, knowing that soon she would face a world that had changed around her while she had quietly transformed herself. With the scent of fresh coffee lingering, the soft hum of traffic below, and Emily's encouraging presence, Claire straightened her posture, the earlier moments of doubt replaced by a calm resolve, and whispered to herself once more, "I will show them who I have become," feeling the words resonate within her like a promise, a mission, and a challenge yet to unfold, leaving the afternoon suspended in anticipation of the journey she was about to undertake. "So this is how it feels to be invisible," Claire Bennett whispered softly to herself as she watched the glossy magazine cover laid across the polished oak counter of the small downtown cafe. The afternoon sun slanted through the large windows, illuminating the sleek coffee machines and the neatly stacked pastries, casting long golden beams across the warm, honey-colored hardwood floor. Outside, light drizzle began to mist the sidewalks, the wet pavement reflecting the city lights in faint, shimmering patterns, adding a quiet tension to the otherwise cozy ambience. Claire leaned slightly closer to the magazine, her eyes scanning the cheerful image of Ryan Carter smiling broadly, the caption boasting of his latest achievements, a reminder of the life moving forward without her. She set the magazine down gently, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper as though grounding herself in the tactile sensation, her chest tight with conflicting emotions of envy, disbelief, and an underlying resolve she refused to deny. A young barista, noticing her contemplative stance, approached with a warm, curious smile and asked if she wanted a refill. "Would you like some more coffee?" Claire nodded, appreciating the simple human connection, the small act of kindness subtly reminding her of her own presence and value in a world that seemed to have already moved on. She picked up her cup, inhaling the rich aroma, and let the warmth seep into her hands, her eyes wandering back to the magazine for a moment before closing it with a decisive motion. "So this is how it feels to be invisible?" she murmured again, louder this time, as if affirming to herself that she would not remain unseen. The soft chatter of other patrons, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the gentle clatter of cups created a symphony around her, a rhythmic background to her internal reckoning. She took a slow sip, letting the heat spread, centering her focus, the tension in her shoulders gradually easing as she reminded herself that visibility came from action, from presence, from creating and sharing her own narrative. Claire stood, placing a hand lightly on the edge of the cafe table, her posture straightening as she allowed a faint, confident smile to surface. She gathered her belongings, including the magazine now folded under her arm, and walked toward the door, stepping into the misty streets, the cool droplets mingling with the warm glow of the cafe behind her. Each step on the slick sidewalk echoed softly, a metronome to the silent promise she made to herself. She would claim her own place in the world, she would not be overlooked, and she would transform the ache of invisibility into a quiet strength. The city hummed around her, each passerby moving with purpose, a reminder of the vitality and motion she would soon join. Her next moves unknown but brimming with potential, leaving the moment suspended in a tense anticipation of what would come next. "I will not let this define me," Claire Bennett whispered firmly, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the late afternoon in the quiet co-working space she had chosen to focus on her latest project. The large windows of the loft-style room framed the soft light of a descending sun, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors and the clusters of desks where a few other professionals typed quietly or held hushed conversations. The faint scent of brewing coffee from the cafe corner mixed with the subtle aroma of aged books lining the nearby shelves, creating a comforting backdrop to Claire's intense concentration. She pulled out her laptop and set it carefully on the sleek, black desk, sliding the invitation to the wedding off to the side, a constant reminder of the personal challenge looming in her mind. Taking a deep breath, she opened her notebook to a fresh page and began to outline the chapters of her empowerment book, each word deliberate, each idea structured to convey resilience and insight. The tapping of her pen against paper was rhythmic, almost meditative, and with every line she wrote, the tension in her chest eased slightly, replaced by a growing sense of agency. As she scribbled, her friend and colleague Laura approached with a warm smile, carrying 2 mugs of herbal tea. "I thought you could use a little pick-me-up," she said gently, setting one mug beside Claire and gesturing for her to take a moment. Claire accepted it gratefully, lifting the warm cup to her lips and feeling the heat seep into her palms, grounding her thoughts. Their brief exchange, a mix of laughter and shared ideas about the project, brought a subtle buoyancy to Claire's mood, reminding her that while the wedding and the past loomed large, she was not alone in her journey. She returned to her notes with renewed focus, sketching out interactive exercises, reflective prompts, and key takeaways for her readers, imagining the empowerment and confidence they might draw from her words. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the workspace and reflecting off the glass partitions, the quiet buzz of activity around her a gentle counterpoint to the intensity of her own internal dialogue. Each sip of tea, each note jotted down, strengthened her resolve, and she repeated to herself under her breath, "I will not let this define me," feeling the mantra solidify into determination. Yet, despite the calm and focus, a ripple of uncertainty remained, the awareness that the upcoming wedding would confront her with old memories, unresolved emotions, and a challenge to the poise she was meticulously cultivating. Claire glanced at the invitation once more, her fingers brushing the edge, a subtle tension threading through her calm exterior, and allowed herself a final deep breath, steeling for the days ahead, aware that every decision in the coming moments would shape her narrative and test the resilience she was building with such careful attention. "Back then I thought love was enough," Claire Bennett whispered softly, the words drifting through the quiet afternoon in the cozy Portland cafe where she had once met Ryan Carter. The sunlight filtered through rain-speckled windows, creating delicate patterns on the worn wooden tables, and illuminating the faint steam rising from freshly poured cups of coffee. Claire sat at her favorite corner table, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug as she recalled the simpler days, the laughter shared over pastries and the gentle warmth of Ryan's smile in a cafe much like this one. Outside, a light drizzle tapped against the glass, a rhythmic backdrop to her swirling thoughts, while inside, the soft murmur of other patrons conversing, the gentle clinking of cups and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine enveloped her in a cocoon of familiarity. She opened her journal, flipping past blank pages until she found sketches of old memories, small notes of moments that once defined her heart, and allowed herself a brief, bittersweet smile. Across the room, a young woman setting the tables offered a tentative greeting, and Claire returned it with a nod, the small exchange grounding her in the present, reminding her that life continued beyond the confines of memory. Claire sipped her coffee slowly, savoring its warmth, her eyes drifting toward the rain-streaked window, as the reflections of passing umbrellas created fleeting patterns on the sidewalk. Each memory of Ryan, his laughter, his gestures, the ease with which he had once fit into her world, brought a pang of nostalgia tempered by the realization of how much she had grown. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, a quiet testament to the resilience she had cultivated. As the cafe's door opened with a soft chime, a breeze carried in the mingled scents of rain and city, fluttering the pages of her journal and reminding her of the world beyond these walls. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds and sensations merge with her thoughts, acknowledging both the beauty and the lessons of the past. She whispered again, "Back then I thought love was enough," letting the phrase settle into her consciousness, a gentle acknowledgement of vulnerability now transformed into awareness. The light shifted as clouds moved across the sky, casting transient shadows on the floor, and Claire felt a subtle tension rise, the uncertainty of what lay ahead mingling with a quiet hope. She gathered her belongings with deliberate care, her journal and pen tucked neatly into her bag, and stood, glancing once more at the familiar cafe interior, her mind alive with contemplation and anticipation, knowing that while the past had shaped her, it did not define her next steps, leaving a lingering question about how her present resolve would meet the challenges awaiting beyond the doors of this serene, rain-kissed space. "It was tough, but I survived," Claire Bennett whispered to herself, the words carrying a quiet triumph as she stepped into the bright, bustling office of the New York publishing house where she had arranged her first major meeting. The late morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting intricate patterns of light across the polished wooden floors and the neatly arranged desks, where assistants moved gracefully, balancing stacks of manuscripts and digital tablets. The air smelled faintly of fresh paper, coffee, and the subtle polish of the hardwood, a comforting yet energizing blend that set the tone for the important day ahead. Claire's fingers brushed over the smooth surface of the reception desk as she checked in, her pulse quickening slightly with anticipation and excitement. She was greeted by a young assistant named Marcus, whose warm smile and professional demeanor helped to ease some of her nervous tension. "Welcome, Ms. Bennett. They are ready for you," he said kindly, leading her through the airy hallways lined with framed awards and photographs of best-selling authors. Claire followed, her mind racing with thoughts of how far she had come from the quiet streets of Seattle and the lingering memories of Portland cafes. As she entered the conference room, the sunlight caught the edges of her notebook and laptop, casting a glow that seemed almost celebratory, and she took a deep breath, letting the energy of the room invigorate her. She greeted the editors and team members with a steady, confident smile, setting her notes on the polished table and organizing her thoughts in preparation for the presentation. Each page she flipped through was a reflection of months of hard work, resilience, and creativity, a tangible manifestation of her dedication. The conversation began, flowing naturally as she explained her concept, answered thoughtful questions, and demonstrated her passion for empowering readers. Claire's eyes sparkled with determination as she made her points, each gesture deliberate, conveying both confidence and authenticity. Outside the window, the city pulsed with life, taxis gliding past, pedestrians navigating their morning routines, the sounds and sights a subtle reminder that her work existed within a larger, dynamic world. A gentle tension lingered in her chest, a blend of hope and uncertainty, as she observed the reactions of the team, noting nods of interest and subtle smiles of approval. Claire took another deep breath, feeling the warmth of the room and the acknowledgement of her effort, yet the thought of the impending wedding still hovered at the edges of her mind, a challenge she knew she would have to face with grace and poise. She closed her notebook momentarily, the sun glinting off her pen as she paused to absorb the moment, a quiet triumph tempered by anticipation. As the meeting concluded, she stood, gathering her belongings with a composed elegance, and cast a final glance around the room, aware that while this victory was hers, the journey was far from complete, leaving her with a lingering curiosity and subtle tension about what would unfold next in the unfolding story of her life. "James, I think this could work," Claire Bennett said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and careful confidence, as she adjusted her notes on the glossy conference table in the bright, modern office of the publishing company in Manhattan. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden streaks across the polished wooden floors and the neatly arranged desks where assistants typed and sorted manuscripts with focused energy. Outside, the city moved with its familiar rhythm, the distant sound of honking taxis and pedestrians chatting on the sidewalks blending with the soft hum of the office, creating a lively backdrop to the pivotal meeting taking place inside. James Whitman, the CEO and Claire's prospective collaborator, leaned back slightly in his ergonomic chair, studying her presentation with a keen yet approachable gaze, a faint smile touching his lips as he nodded in subtle encouragement. Claire felt a wave of anticipation and nervous energy course through her fingers lightly tapping on the edge of the table, the warmth of the sun on her shoulders a grounding contrast to the tension tightening her chest. She outlined her vision for the empowerment book, detailing each chapter with meticulous clarity, while James occasionally interjected with insightful questions that pushed her to think more deeply about the impact and reach of her ideas. The soft clatter of keyboards, the muted chatter of colleagues, and the occasional shuffle of papers punctuated the conversation, enveloping them in an atmosphere of industrious energy and collaborative possibility. Claire glanced briefly at a young intern arranging demonstration copies of sample manuscripts along a nearby counter, their careful movements and quiet focus serving as a subtle reminder of the care and precision required to succeed in such a competitive environment. Taking a deep breath, Claire leaned slightly forward, letting her confidence radiate through her posture and gaze. "James, I think this could work," she repeated with renewed conviction, the phrase now resonating as both an assertion and an invitation for partnership. James smiled more fully this time, his nod acknowledging not just the feasibility of the project, but also Claire's capacity to carry it with authority and creativity. The light shifted subtly as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, the golden glow reflecting off the glass surfaces and adding a soft warmth to the room, highlighting the careful lines of her presentation and the intensity of her focus. Claire adjusted the papers in front of her one last time, a quiet rhythm of deliberate action reinforcing her readiness to move forward, while the sense of shared understanding with James hinted at new possibilities and the potential for a transformative collaboration. Yet even in the midst of this encouraging moment, a subtle tension lingered at the edges of her mind, the thought of the upcoming wedding, the unresolved emotions connected to Ryan, and the unknown ways her newfound confidence and the success of this project would intersect with her personal life, leaving her poised on the threshold of opportunity, excitement, and anticipation for what would come next. "I am ready to face the world," Claire Bennett whispered, the words steady yet filled with a quiet undercurrent of anticipation, as she stepped onto the sunlit terrace of the high-rise co-working space overlooking Manhattan. The late afternoon air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of the East River mingled with the aroma of nearby cafes, and the golden rays of the sun bounced off the glass skyscrapers, casting shimmering reflections onto the polished concrete of the terrace. Claire's eyes scanned the bustling streets below, watching the ebb and flow of pedestrians and cyclists, each movement a reminder of the city's relentless energy and the possibilities that lay ahead. She adjusted her blazer with a deliberate motion, a silent affirmation of her own authority and poise, and allowed herself a slow, grounding breath. The sound of her phone pinging brought her attention to a message from her assistant, confirming the final details of a networking event she would be attending later in the evening, a crucial opportunity to solidify her professional presence and connect with influential figures. Claire smiled faintly, the simple act reinforcing her readiness to engage with the world on her own terms. Nearby, a colleague waved as they passed by, carrying a portfolio, and Claire returned the gesture with a composed nod, feeling a sense of quiet camaraderie and support within the professional ecosystem she had carefully cultivated. She took a few steps toward the glass railing, peering down at the streets alive with motion, her mind weaving through the intersections of past experiences and future ambitions, the tension between the two leaving a subtle thrill in her chest. The soft hum of traffic, punctuated by distant conversations and the occasional siren, created an ambient rhythm that echoed her inner deliberation. She turned to glance at the terrace's seating area, noting the strategic arrangement of tables and chairs that would soon host colleagues and potential collaborators, the scene almost cinematic in its anticipation. A gentle breeze lifted strands of her hair as she exhaled, releasing the remnants of nervous energy and feeling a surge of controlled excitement. Her gaze shifted back to the horizon, the city stretching infinitely, the late sunlight reflecting off river waters and casting a warm glow across her face, highlighting a serene determination. Claire picked up her notebook from the nearby table, flipping to a page filled with bullet points and ideas, and began to review them, her fingers tracing the outlines of her plans, a tactile connection to the tangible steps she would take. Each item she reviewed reinforced her confidence, each thought of potential outcomes layering the anticipation with calculated readiness. The urban panorama before her and the rhythmic pulse of the city below merged with her internal cadence, a mixture of focus, hope, and measured excitement, yet the knowledge of the approaching personal encounter, the wedding she would attend, hovered quietly, a subtle tension she could not ignore, leaving her poised on the edge of an emotional precipice, fully prepared to meet the challenges ahead, while the resolution of her personal journey remained tantalizingly just out of reach. "Let us see who notices me now," Claire Bennett whispered to herself, stepping into the grand ballroom of the elegant Manhattan hotel where the evening wedding reception was unfolding. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall arched windows, casting warm golden light across the polished marble floors and illuminating the crystal chandeliers that sparkled with a gentle brilliance. The air carried the faint scent of fresh floral arrangements mingled with the aroma of hors d'oeuvres being arranged by attentive staff in crisp uniforms, each movement deliberate and graceful. Claire adjusted her silk evening gown, the soft fabric brushing against her skin, and took a slow, grounding breath, feeling the subtle flutter of anticipation in her chest. Around her, guests mingled, laughter and soft music blending into a harmonious backdrop that amplified the contrast between her internal tension and the celebratory atmosphere. She walked with measured steps toward the main area where she would be formally introduced, her polished heels clicking softly against the floor, each sound echoing faintly in the vast room. James Whitman, standing beside her with a composed smile, gave her a subtle nod of encouragement, his presence a steadying anchor in the sea of unfamiliar faces. Claire's eyes scanned the crowd, noting whispered glances and turned heads, each one reinforcing the reality of her emergence as someone to be recognized and respected. The gentle hum of conversation, punctuated by the soft clink of glasses and the melodic strains of a string quartet, enveloped her, creating a cinematic rhythm that mirrored the rapid beating of her heart. As the maitre d' approached to announce her as the author of an upcoming bestseller, Claire felt a quiet thrill, a mixture of pride and exhilaration, threading through her entire being, the culmination of months of dedication and careful planning. Each step she took, guided by James's reassuring presence, felt both natural and deliberate, a dance of poise and self-assuredness that captured the attention of those around her. The chandeliers refracted the light, scattering delicate patterns across the faces of intrigued guests, while Claire's own reflection caught momentarily in the mirrored panel near the entrance, reminding her of the transformation she had undergone. Despite the outward calm and the subtle smiles exchanged with new acquaintances, a tendril of tension lingered, the awareness of Ryan's presence and the personal history entwined with the evening keeping a pulse of uncertainty at the edges of her consciousness. She took another deep breath, letting the ambient warmth and the approving glances of attendees fortify her inner confidence, but the unspoken anticipation of how the night would unfold remained, a delicate thread pulling her forward into moments yet unseen, leaving the scene charged with both poised elegance and a quiet, suspenseful curiosity about what would come next. "This is my moment," quietly yet loudly, Claire Bennett whispered as she stepped further into the opulent ballroom of the Manhattan Hotel, the evening sky outside a deepening canvas of navy and gold that filtered through the expansive arched windows. The warm glow of chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors and crystal glassware, casting gentle glimmers across the elegantly dressed guests who were absorbed in animated